All right. Now, the next thing we want to tackle is setting up our blueprints or orthographic views and finding reference. Right. We want to find lots of reference images. Now, I have this app called PeerRef. It is free, so this is a very cool app that we're going to use a lot for this assignment. And you can literally just sort of drag and drop images in from your web browser. And you can zoom into them and get like really nice close-up shots. I have a few drawings. I have a few things like just the sort of headlight piece of our Ford Pinto here. A bunch of different views, some back views, things like that, because we're going to be studying this a lot. And I've even gone as far as to add some interior shots because I do plan on modeling the interior for this eventually. And I will definitely be adding to this PeerRef file as I go, right? So like, for example, when I get to the part where I'm modeling like the side view mirror or the handles, door handles, I'm probably going to want to find more higher res images of these things so I can kind of look at them a little bit more closely. So this is something that I'm going to be adding to as I go, as I model and things like that. One of the really crucial things you're going to need right off the bat, and this is going to be sort of like a decision maker if this is a model that you want to try or not, is finding good blueprints or orthographic views. Extremely important. Now, it's not important they're super accurate. Like here's the sort of drawing I have for the 73 Ford Pinto, and I don't even know if this is the exact model that I'm going to be kind of shooting for. This one right here is kind of the one that I like, and I probably am going to mix and match some of these details. Like I like these sort of vents on the rear windshield. I might add those in. So no one's being the police of me, right? And no one's going to be looking at this model and being like, and dissecting it and saying, that's not exactly like a 1973 Ford Pinto, right? I can have a little bit of creative freedom with this and a little bit of fun with this if I want to, right? And a lot of these old cars as well are so modified by this day and age that none of them are really stock anymore. Kind of why I like doing classic cars. I just think they're a lot more interesting. So don't feel like you need to be super accurate to the most minuscule little detail of your model. I want you to try to be as accurate as possible, but if you want to mix and match things and have a little bit of creative freedom, I think that's absolutely fine. And in fact, that's encouraged, right? So you don't necessarily have to find the exact same year of the model of the car that you want to model, just as long as it's similar, right? It doesn't have to be exactly the same. Now, the image that I have here that I found is a little low res, but I think we're gonna make it do. We're gonna make it work with what we have. I do want to do a few things to this to kind of prepare to bring this image into Maya to start modeling my car, though. The first thing I want to do is kind of upscale it a little bit. So it's currently pretty small, right? So if I were to zoom out to like 100%, right, that's kind of a small image there. I want to upscale it, so I'm going to go to image size. We're going to scale this up like we'll do 300%, right? So we'll do 300%, and I'm gonna set my resample to you can experiment around with the different sort of modes here. We're gonna do preserve details 2.0 because that seems like that would be the better one, right? It's not 1.0, it's 2.0. So we're gonna go with 2.0. There's a lot of noise and stuff, but again, I'm not super concerned about that. We're only going to be using this as sort of like a basic guide to begin with. At some point, we're going to be kind of not looking at this so much and just looking at our photographic reference, right? So we're going to be using this very carefully at the beginning to kind of lay down the basic proportions. But at some point, once we have those basic proportions laid out, we're going to kind of start ignoring this and just focusing on looking at our photographic details. So while this is a very important thing to have, make sure that you find good blueprints to use for your project. It's not like a death sentence to your project if it's kind of low res or if it doesn't have a lot of details, right? What's more important than that is making sure that it's all scaled correctly, right? What's more important than that is making sure that everything matches up scale-wise in our image. So for example, I'm in Photoshop here, and you can do this in any image editing software. It doesn't have to be Photoshop. But this is a process or a step that we need to do, right? So what I want to make sure right off the bat, before I do anything with this, is just make sure things are lined up and scaled properly. So in Photoshop, we want to bring up our guides or rulers. So I'm just going to go to View, Rulers, make sure that's turned on. And then what we can do here is we can just drag down lines. And we could just use one line to begin with. We don't have to be super accurate with it. And I just kind of want to make sure things are kind of scaled correctly, right? So I want to make sure the bottom of the tire matches the bottom of the tire in the side view, the front, the windows are aligned, the headlights are aligned, things like that, right? Before I even get started with editing this image, I just kind of want to make sure things are kind of aligned. Right, and we can do that from this as well. So you can see here that this is pretty close. So even though it's a low res image, this is pretty close to what we want, right? As I'm looking and kind of lining things up, making sure things are lined up properly. So I think this will do for our image, our reference orthographic blueprint. Now, the next thing I want to do is arrange this in a way that will work well with our workspace in Maya. So if we jump over into Maya real quick, and I'm going to hit spacebar to jump in our 4-panel view. And I'm just going to create a little arrow here. So I'm going to go to poly modeling, and we're going to do a little cone. And I'm going to point this cone down, so negative or 90 degrees, and rotate X. So what we see now is this cone, if we're thinking of this as an arrow, right? In our top view, it's pointing straight down. In our front view, it's pointing towards us. And in our side view, it's pointing to the left. Now, what I like to do back in Photoshop is arrange my orthographic view where it kind of matches that layout, right? And that'll just make it easier to set up in Maya once I get this in Maya. So I want my top view to be way down over here. We'll talk a little bit about the rear view. We can definitely do the rear view as well. My side view, I want it over here, again, pointing to the left. Make very sure that your car is pointing to the left. If it's pointing to the right, you'll end up modeling it backwards. So yeah, if you want to follow along with me, it's very important that you get these steps right. Otherwise, you're going to, right off the bat, you're going to be confused if you don't have these set up correctly. So let's go ahead and get started and set these guys up. So I'm going to start. Let's start just by making our canvas bigger. Let's give ourselves some room to work here, right? So I'm going to zoom out and let's go to crop. And I'm just going to make my canvas a lot bigger just so I have some room to work with, right? And I'm just going to cut this image up. So I'm just going to take my marquee selection or my rectangular marquee selection. And I'm going to say, take my front view here. And we're going to start, I like starting with the front view. We're going to start with the front view. And I'm just going to hold down Control, which will basically cut it from that location. And I'm just going to move it down here to the bottom left, right? Again, jumping back into Maya, this is where my front view is, in the bottom left. Right, and then I'm going to pull down some guides. Let's hit Control D to deselect. And then I'm going to pull down some guides to kind of line this up a little bit. So I'm just going to pull down some reference guides here for the very top of the car, the very bottom of the car. We'll line up the side view mirrors. We'll do the tops and bottoms of the headlight. I think that will be good for our initial lineup. Now let's line up. Let's make some guidelines for the sides as well. So let's go both sides. So right to the very edge of both sides. And let's do also like the inside of the headlight here. So maybe just right around there and right around there, right? It's very important that we get this lined up correctly. If not, we're going to be sort of fighting our different orthographic views and sort of constantly having the struggle of like moving it one way and then moving verts the other way. And then it's just going to be a pain if we don't get this lined up correctly. So this is another thing that I find I see students sort of just rush through because they're excited to get to the modeling phase. Don't rush through this, right? Every time I see a student rush through this phase, they end up having to go back to it. And everything that they've modeled up to that point is just not usable, right? Because they didn't set this up correctly. Take the time, set this up correctly, get it right. Make sure that you have a good orthographic view or blueprint. In a lot of cases, if you don't have a good blueprint, you may need to rethink your choice. You may need to choose a different car. It's very important to get this set up right, though. Okay, so next, let's do the side view. So we're going to take our side view, same thing, and we're going to just copy and paste that, and we can just bring that straight down here. And now I'm fortunate enough to have orthographic views that are already scaled properly. So one thing I want to make sure that I don't do by accident is, for example, like hit Control T and scale this differently. The second I scale that differently, I'm messing everything up, right? So I'm totally messing up all my proportions and everything. So that's the first thing I want to do, is make sure that everything is scaled appropriately. And now when I sort of put this in place, and we can come in here and kind of look at this, right? So the top lines up pretty well. The bottom lines up pretty well. We have the top of the headlights there, the bumper right there. So everything's lining up pretty good. The side view headlights, everything here lines up pretty good. I can then take my top view here. So in this case, my top view is pointing in the wrong direction. We need that to be pointing down. Again, if I jump back over into Maya, I want my top view pointing down. So I'm going to select that, hit Control T, hold down Shift, so I get like this little curved selection or curved turn tool on the left when I kind of hover over the outside here. So if I just rotate that, it'll rotate freely. I don't want it to rotate freely. I want to hold down Shift so it snaps to 15 degrees and eventually rotate that 90 degrees. Now here's a very important thing here. If you're new to Photoshop or new to an imaging editing program, I'm currently still holding down my Shift key and my mouse key. So I'm still kind of snapping this around. This is where I see a lot of people mess up just because they're unfamiliar with Photoshop, for example. If I release Shift, right? See how that moved, right? So now it's off. It's like negative 10.6 degrees, right? So I want to make sure I'm keeping that at 90 degrees. If I release Shift first, it's going to move, and that's going to throw my angle off. So instead of releasing Shift first, I want to release my left mouse first, and then I can release Shift. That way it's going to be perfectly lined up. And then I can line this up with my top view. Make sure that that's all looking good. If I have to, I can use my arrow keys to kind of nudge it around to get it right on target. So I think something like that is pretty good. If you hold down Shift and arrow keys, it'll jump in a larger increment. And if I hold down Control and arrow keys, it will move. Or is it Control? Yeah, Control arrow key will move in smaller increments. Okay. And then for my rear view, we need a rear view, so it's not something I want to neglect, but I'm going to put this one just over here and try to get that lined up properly. Now, again, this is a very important step. If you accidentally scale it, so for example, again, if I'm moving this around and I grab this and I hit Control T, which is free transform, and I accidentally scale that or accidentally rotate it or I squash it, right? So I like hold down Control and kind of like squash it or stretch it like that. I'm messing everything up. So you want to be very careful about doing this. And if you mess things up and you start modeling, you're going to realize that things are messed up after you start modeling, and then you're going to have to go back and redo your blueprint. So make sure you put the effort in to sort of get this correct. Right. So we have these laid out properly now. I'm going to go back to my crop tool right here and scale this back down. And now what I like to do with this big empty space that we have right here, I'm going to hit enter to kind of commit that crop. And then what I like to do with this big empty space right here is I will go and I will bring in one of my reference images. So I like this image right here that we worked on earlier. So I'm going to just right click and copy that. And then I'm going to paste that, Control T, free transform. And I'm going to scale that in and just kind of have that fit in that space nicely. That way, when I'm, as I'm modeling, I have a nice reference image right here in my orthographic view that I can look at. And it's not just a big blank white space. I have that empty space, might as well use it for something, right? So this is the way that I like to set up my orthographic views. Now, I've seen in the past, and I've done in the past, where I've made each view of the car, like the front, top, side view, made them different images, and you can bring in images separately. However, I find that very difficult to kind of line things up because they're all different images and all different resolutions. I find that if you just use one image for everything, that's going to be your best option, right, to move forward. Now, before we save this, I'm going to jump back over into Maya. Let's start by creating a new scene. And I'm going to start a project. So this is a very important step as well. We want to start a project so we can put all of our image files, everything in this project directory. So when we move our folder around or move our project around, we can move the whole folder rather than just kind of moving around a Maya file, right? So to do that, we're going to go to File, Project Window, and I'm going to click New. And I have a directory set up where I keep all of my projects. So if you have one, that's fine. If not, you could just put it on your desktop. Just pick a location that works for you. And I'm going to name this project Ford Pinto because that's the name of the car. It's not necessary for me to have all of these project locations. I can kind of pick and choose them if I want, but it doesn't hurt anything to have them. So I'm just going to kind of leave them in here, and we're going to hit accept. And now we didn't see anything happen, but what that did, let's go over to my studio here where I have that project. And then somewhere in here, we should see a Ford Pinto folder now, right? So what that did is create our project. So if I click that, I see all these files in here. And this is where all of my Maya files, all of my image textures, if I do animations or dynamics, this is where everything lives in this one Ford Pinto folder now. So again, if I'm moving computers, if I'm switching between a classroom computer and my home computer, I'm going to move this whole folder over. So that way everything kind of stays linked up, and everything that I bring over, I'm going to put somewhere in this directory, in this folder here. So now that we have that set up, I'm going to go back to Photoshop and I'm going to save this into one of those directories. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to look for that. We're going to go to the location of that Ford Pinto directory, and I'm going to put this in Source Images. So we'll start by saving this as a PSD file. That way I can edit it later if I want. And I'm just going to name this FP Ortho for Ford Pinto Orthographic. And I'm going to hit save. We will maximize compatibility. And I'm also going to save as a copy, or save a copy, and save this as a JPEG. And again, just we'll name it FP Ortho. We can take off copy, even though it might add it back in. I'm not sure, but we'll take off copy and make sure it's saved as a JPEG. Save as. We'll go ahead and hit maximum here and hit OK. Okay. Now, so we have our orthos saved in our source images directory here. So now we're ready to bring them in. But first, what I want to do is figure out the scale, right? Scale is extremely important. So right off the bat, I want to figure out the scale, and I want to do a couple things with my cameras just to make sure my camera's set up correctly. So we want to figure out the scale. So let's go over to Google, and I'm just going to use Google AI and just say, what are the dimensions? Let me bring this over so you can see it. We're going to say, what are the dimensions of a Ford Pinto? And we'll go 1972. And it just works, right? It tells us what the dimensions are. It tells us inches. We want it in centimeters. So I'm going to say in cm. It gives us millimeters. That's fine. We can just move a decimal spot to make it centimeters or inches if we want. I like staying in centimeters because that's usually the default for most 3D apps. So we're going to keep it as centimeters. Right. So the next thing I want to do is make a box that is the size of a Ford Pinto. So I'm going to just create a cube, and I'm going to go to my height, my width, height, and depth. So if our length is 4,040 millimeters, I believe that will make it 41.4 millimeters, I think. So let's go depth. So length, depth, same thing. So let's do 41.4. 5.4. That's not right. I think we moved it in the wrong direction. I know that my grid is about 5 inches, so I know that's not the correct value. 163 inches. So I think we moved the decimal. I don't know if we moved it in the right direction. So let's try 4140. So that's millimeters. Let me just make sure what our workspace is set in. So we are set to centimeters. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank here. Let me bring up a new tab here. And let's say 163 inches. So we're going to go inches to cm. 163. Okay, so I just needed to move the decimal spot over one less. So we're at 400 and we want to be at 404 millimeters. All right, so that is our depth. Our width is going to be 177. We'll round up to 178. Again, it doesn't have to be super accurate. And then our height is going to be 137. So this is the overall dimensions of our Ford Pinto. I do want this setting pretty much right on the top of the grid, like that. And when we make our orthographic views, this is what we're going to sort of fit those to. Doesn't have to be super accurate, right? We just want to get the scale about right. So if you want to round out your numbers, if you're not sure if you have it correct, it's completely fine. We just want to get it in the ballpark, right? So now we can bring in our orthographic views that we made. So I'm going to go to File, we're going to go to View in our perspective view. Let's not do it in our perspective view. Let's do it in our front view to begin with. So I'm going to zoom out quite a bit. I'm going to hit 4 on my keyboard. So we're just looking at wireframe and we're not looking at our shaded view. So 4 on my keyboard to go into wireframe view. And then I'm going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. And look at that. It takes us right to the correct folder because we saved that in our source images folder. So again, if it's a step I'm showing you to do, don't neglect to do that step, right? Because it's for a very important reason. So we're going to load in our JPEG here. And this is our front view. So to begin with, I'm just going to sort of grab this and move it around. And as we're doing this, we're not going to see our numbers changing here. But if we go to we actually select our image here and look at our channel box, we see these values changing here. right? So when you first bring it in, you're only going to see these values. But if you just kind of marquee select over that ortho view, you're going to see all of these here. These are kind of what I want to pay attention to right now. And the first thing I want to do is just scale this up so it fits in that box the way that I want it to fit in that box, right? Currently, I can't see the box. We can turn our grid off right there. So we can toggle our grid on and off just so I can see that box. And I'm going to scale this up. And for this first one, we're going to do this very sort of freely, right? We're not going to pay attention too much to the numbers yet. I'm just kind of fiddling with this until I get my car, my front view, scaled up and fitting in that box the best that I can. Once we have this right, we can kind of use a lot of those numbers, right, to bring it over. And again, doesn't have to be super accurate, right? So let's scale it down just a little bit, move it around. Maybe just a little bit more scaled down, and then that should fit in that box pretty well, right? Centered and everything. Okay. Now, once I have this, I want to come over here to my channel box and take a look at these numbers. Now, to make life a little bit easier for me, I'm going to round these numbers. So I'm going to go to my scale, and we're going to just round these down to 65. Right? Just going to be easier to remember. I can then sort of readjust my position here. So that's pretty much in the center. And then I'm going to look at these two values here, and I want to round those values as well. So for translate, 319.6. Let's round that to 320. And this one is 286.6. Let's round that to 287. All right, so now we have nice whole numbers that are easy to remember. Right, that one is lined up properly. Scale is 65. Translate X 320. Translate Y 287. Okay, now you're going to see this in your perspective view. So if we go back to our 4-panel view, we're going to see this in our perspective view. Notice how that is sitting in the middle of that box in our perspective view. I want to make sure that I move this behind that box. And this could be as far back as you want it. Doesn't really matter. So you're going to get this value here. Doesn't really matter. We just want it to be behind our car. We don't want it to be up here. We want it to be behind this little green thing, which is our image plane. And we'll hide that in a second. But we want it to be behind our car. So that's another very important step. And then I'm going to jump over to my attribute editor with that selected. And I want to do a couple things here. I want to go to my color, my alpha gain, and I'm going to drop down my alpha gain just so that kind of fades out a little bit. We'll do something like 0.3. And I'm going to turn off looking through camera. And it'll disappear from our perspective view, but we'll keep it in our front view. And then I'm going to take this green guy right here and just Control H to hide. That's our front view camera. Okay. Now let's do the side view. So same thing. Let's jump into our side view. I'm going to hit 4 on my keyboard, so we're just looking at the wireframe. We're going to go to View, Image, Import Image, and once again, we'll bring in that same image. I think I did Import Movie by mistake. Import Image. There's our JPEG. It's very tiny, but remember, we know that the scale, so let's select it here. We know that my scales are 65. So I'll make my scale 65. And I may need to jump back to remember the values, but what I want is my Y position or my translate Y. So if I go back to this view and select it, I can see that my translate Y was 287. So with this one, I'm going to make my translate Y 287. And then I just need to kind of move it forward a little bit so it fits in that box the best I can. Doesn't have to be perfect, but close. And then I'm going to go to my attribute editor. I'm going to drop down my alpha gain, again, something like 0.3. I'm going to go to, I want to move this, again, I want to move this back opposite of our camera. So I'm going to move this back in this, in my X position. So it's behind, the car is in between our camera and our image plane. That's what I want, basically. And then I can just hide that camera little display guy. We'll select that and go to looking through camera. So we don't see it in our perspective view. And then I'll do the same thing for our top view, right? So let's go into our top view. I'm going to zoom way out, hit 4 on our keyboard, view, image, import image. Again, I know that my scale for this is 65, so we're going to scale this up to 65. Let's turn the grid off so I can see what I'm doing. And for this one, I want to make sure it's lined up properly. So what I want to look at now is my position in the translate X. So I'm going to go back to my front view, look at my translate X as 320. And again, I'm just hitting spacebar to switch between my views. So I want my translate X to be 320, and it's already in the perfect position. And then I just need to move it down to fit within that box. Doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough, right? We'll deal with the back view later. That's something that we'll take care of in a later video, but it's basically the same process. You just have to create a new view. So you just have to go to Panels, Orthographic, and create a new back view. And you basically do the same thing, but we'll do that when we get to the back. The back's probably, it's generally one of the more difficult areas to model. So we're going to wait until we sort of have the practice to do the back, to model the back. But we're going to start with the front and move backwards. Okay, and then the last step, once again, I want to just take this and move it down a little bit so it's not setting right on top of my model. I'm going to grab this guy and Control H to hide it. I'm going to go to my attribute editor, drop down my alpha gain to something like 0.3. And check on looking through camera. All right, now for the most part, we have our project set up. A couple other things I want to do here in my perspective view. I want to go to my camera. So I'm going to select my camera and my perspective view. Let's jump over to the perspective view. I'm going to select my camera right here. And I'm going to set my focal length to 50. That's a bit more, or actually I think it's angle of view we want. Or is it focal length? We'll stick to focal length. I think this is a bit more of what like the human eye sees. So we're gonna set that to 50. I want to make sure my near clip plane is 0.5. I think by default it's like 0.01, which is really tiny. And then I'm going to set my far clip plane to something like 100 million. Right? It's just something really high. This is really important. If you don't do this, then you're going to get some weird sort of artifacting happening whenever you zoom in and out. You can kind of see it there when I zoom way out. But that's a very important step. Near clip plane, 0.5, far clip plane, 100 million. Now, if you don't want to do this every time, what I like to do, instead of changing these values every single time that I start a new project, is I will go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, go down to, is it Settings? cameras. There we go. And you can set your near and far clip plane right here. So just set it here, and then every time you open Maya, that will be your default settings. So that will save you a lot of time. Okay, so now we can take that cube that we made, we can delete it, and we can start modeling our car. And that will be what we do in the next video. One more thing I forgot to mention, to save your file. So once you have all this set up, make sure you save your file. So we're going to go to project, file, save scene as, and notice since we have our project set correctly, it takes us right to that project directory, right? So I'm going to go ahead and name this Ford Pinto. We'll do start, right? So we can save in iterations. This will be the start of my Ford Pinto. I may want to change it to something else later on, but we're just going to say Ford Pinto start, save as, and now I have that project save. I'm ready to start modeling. So again, we'll start modeling in the next video, but it's very important to set this up correctly. If you don't, I promise you, if you don't set it up correctly, you're just going to be struggle bussing it until you do have it set up correctly.